All right, we are confirmed that we are recording. Thank you so much for joining us today for the third installment of Data Centers 101. Today, our topic is communities. So data centers and the community. I'm Dr. Natasha D. Jarnett, and I'm at the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute at University of Louisville, and I lead community engagement in the institute and serve on the research teams of Greenheart Louisville and the Superfund Research Center. And it is with a grateful heart that I acknowledge my colleagues, Drs. Candy Walker and Joy Hart, who lead community engagement for Greenheart Louisville, and Drs. Ted Smith and Lauren Heberly, who lead the Community Engagement Core of the Superfund Research Center. This series is hosted by the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute, and it's for a program called The Exchange that brings together the community engagement initiatives of both Greenheart Louisville and the University of Louisville Superfund Research Center. And we also want to thank Physicians for Social Responsibility for being a sponsor of this series. As we get started, I will note that the opinions expressed by the presenters are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of University of Louisville or the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute, nor do the use of logos therein indicate endorsement. So there are a few goals of the series. We want to build shared knowledge through dialogue with experts around the emerging topic of data centers. We want to share resources on the topic, and we want to understand multiple viewpoints, including the potential impacts to health, economics, the environment, policy, and communities, which is what we'll be discussing today. It's important to note that the topic and the viewpoints may be controversial. Some topics may be highly charged. So please be respectful of all the speakers, as well as all the people that are commenting in the chat. And when we have questions and comments and response, please try to keep those focused on the topic and not on the person. So be ready to add your comments in the chat. You all have been wonderful at commenting in the chat, sharing resources. So please keep that going. And you've been also fantastic when people ask questions in the chat, answering them if you have that expertise or that insight or adding to the discussion. The chat has been a highlight of these discussions. You'll have an opportunity to have question and answer with our presenter after her presentation. And so you can then raise hand, ask your question out loud, or you can drop your question in the chat at any time during her presentation. That way you won't forget it later. So last week we got to know a little bit about who is here in the audience, and we want to do that once more. So we have a Menti poll for you to participate in. We've got a couple different questions so we can learn a little bit more about who's in the audience and your thoughts on data centers so far. So please join the conversation. I'm going to hand it off to Eviana to share our poll and our polling results. Okay, Eviana, we're seeing a calendar. Oh, here we go. All right, we got the first question up. From what state are you joining? Please share what state you are joining from. So far, it's a lot of Kentucky, Kentucky, Kentucky. We got Washington State, Michigan, Maryland. We've got even more specific, Louisville, Kentucky. We got Washington, D.C., Virginia. Fantastic. Thank you all for sharing. We've got a couple from Washington, D.C. Could be Washington State or Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, Menti has separated that, but we've got some great representation. Georgia, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Oh, another specific, Lexington, Kentucky, and Louisville, Kentucky. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. It looks like most of you have responded thus far. Oh, and thanks for adding them in the chat. You all are awesome. Fantastic. Nebraska, Rhode Island. All right, so our next question is, to what extent do you believe data centers will impact the surrounding communities? All right, we'll give it a minute. Nearly half of you have responded. And the answer is hovering around the a lot of impact area. This is a sliding scale, so you can slide it from no impact all the way up to a lot of impact. And I see some comments in the chat. 100% someone has written here in the chat. All right, it looks like we're slowing down on the screen, but more people are joining. This is fantastic. Please continue to join our Menti poll. It's really interesting to get to have this opportunity to hear your thoughts and your feedback. And I think we are holding steady at about 4.6, 4.7 out of 5. So overall, the group is thinking that data centers can have a lot of impact for the surrounding community. See another comment in the chat, a lot of impact, 100% impact, 5.0. So this question requires a bit of thought. Which 3 impacts of data centers concern you most? So you're limited to selecting only 3. You can select from health, power use, air pollution, water use, noise pollution, light pollution, energy costs. Let's see. Biodiversity, heat island, property values, or energy source. Thus far, we're getting a lot of people ranking health and water use pretty high, followed by power use and energy costs. More than half of you have completed the survey. I see in the chat, we've got health in the chat, we've got energy use, water, and noise. We've got environmental, historical, and cultural and energy. Very interesting comments. Thanks so much, folks. And we'll go to our last question of potential benefits of data centers. So what benefits of data centers stand out to you? And the options that you can select from include local tax revenues, AI innovation, jobs, investments in the community, economic development, geopolitical positioning, infrastructure upgrades, AI efficiency, security, or none. And so far, our top options are none, AI innovation, infrastructure upgrades, and AI efficiency. And let me change my order on that. AI innovation, none, infrastructure upgrades, AI efficiency. Very interesting. Local tax revenues, jobs, and investments in the communities are running neck and neck. There's a comment in the chat. You need to frame this as cost versus benefit. Okay, we'll consider that for the next Menti. I see a comment in the chat for none. Sorry that you're having that trouble with Menti. Okay, thank you all so much. This poll will stay open. So if you're still thinking about it and selecting between your options, you're welcome to continue to do that. We'll be glad to look back at this later. Thank you so much, Eviana, for sharing this. And I am going to attempt to share a video. Make sure the sound is on. Bear with me just a moment as I work to share. And apologies in advance if there is an advertisement. If there is, I will try to get it off the screen as quickly as possible. We have about a 7-minute video to share with you. And this video is from ABC News, and they've looked at communities all around the US to share some of the perspectives that they have encountered around community views. And after this, I'll be glad to introduce our presenter and hand it over to her.
Now to an ABC News investigation. Half of all the new demand for electricity over the next 5 years in the U.S. is expected to come from data centers. They are the backbone of AI technology. In partnership with our stations across the country, our Elizabeth Schulze shows us how they're dividing communities, bringing the promise of new jobs, but fears of higher utility bills.
This was the sound at Laura Evans' home in suburban Chicago last spring when backup generators kicked in at the data center 1,000 feet from her backyard.
And it never goes away.
Never goes away.
Laura tells us the data center emits a low hum 24/7, and it's not just the noise taking a toll. She says in the last year, her average electricity bill has spiked 23%.
And how do you budget when it's changing that much in 1 year?
You can't.
And the electric company warned prices could rise even more,
They need more power at the data centers.
saying one reason why is increased electricity use from data centers and artificial intelligence.
The energy demand from these facilities affects our ability to meet clean energy goals, have a livable planet, and also just pay our bills.
ABC News and our owned and affiliated stations spoke with communities across the country, grappling with the rapid buildup of data centers to support the AI boom. An analysis from our data team found there are more than 3,000 data centers in the U.S. About 1,200 more are now under construction or soon to be built.
If you're watching a show or if you're using AI, ultimately a lot of the computation happening there, or at least the storage for that thing, is in a data center somewhere.
And our analysis finds a majority of the country's large data centers are or will be in cities, towns, or developed suburbs.
You need a really well-developed, very consistent grid. They need to be extremely reliable in the energy that they use, because if a data center suddenly goes out, if it completely loses power, all the tens of thousands of people who are interacting with it are suddenly going to be very mad.
When these data centers go offline, your apps can go down almost right away.
Exactly.
So this is pretty much as close as we're going to get to where this data center is popping up. It's just a massive construction site. Hard to comprehend the scale of this.
A 2-hour drive north of Laura's home, we visited the site of what will be one of the biggest data centers in the U.S. in the small town of Port Washington, Wisconsin. A $15 billion project backed by OpenAI and Oracle that's part of the White House's Stargate initiative announced on President Trump's second day in office. The campus sits on a plot of farmland bigger than 500 football fields and will eventually use about the same amount of electricity needed to keep the lights on in all the homes in Philadelphia.
They'd be putting power lines that are taller than apparently the Statue of Liberty.
Tom Utek has lived on this land for 40 years. He's an artist who draws inspiration from its natural beauty. Last year, he got a letter from his utility company saying it plans to build a massive power line for the data center right across his property.
I had no choice. And basically they're saying that if you don't agree, we will take it by eminent domain.
They'll just take over your land.
Yeah, and we'll fight it to the end.
He showed us where the power line would go, wiping out dozens of trees he planted.
There's no way this environment around this neighborhood could ever be the same if it's cut in half again by these giant things.
We expect attendees will act in a civil manner at all times.
At a town hall this month, we saw how the data center is dividing the community.
We need clarity, and we need it now, because we are not going to pay double the amount of our utility bills. Do you understand that?
These are good-paying union jobs that are part of a once-in-a-generation investment in Port Washington.
Mayor Ted Neitzke defends the project.
These are huge companies that are kind of the face of AI right now, OpenAI, Oracle. Are you convinced that they will be willing to invest in this community?
They've been awesome. I mean, they have met every expectation we've given them.
He says the data center will create 4,000 temporary construction jobs and bring in much-needed tax revenue.
My greatest fear was that I would wake up one day and our downtown would be a ghost town again. And as a dad who raised my kids here and was born and raised here, I wanted this to be a better place.
But some residents still aren't buying it.
This is an abuse of power.
The mayor even facing an attempt to recall him from office that ultimately failed. This video shows one opponent who chanted recall at a city meeting last December. She's handcuffed and physically removed from the meeting by police.
It was incredibly shocking. I never imagined anything like that ever happening.
There was a pretty heated moment a couple months ago at one of the council meetings.
What are you doing?
How do you react to the backlash from the video?
How do I react to it? I can play you the voicemails of the threats I receive from all over the country to my family's safety. I can play you the voicemails of the threats to our police department from all over the country.
In statements to ABC News, the tech companies behind the Wisconsin project pointed to economic benefits for the region. OpenAI said in Wisconsin and across all our U.S. Stargate sites, we are committed to paying our own way on energy so that our operations do not increase local electricity prices. Oracle added it will invest in wind, solar, and batteries, which means more reliable, affordable energy will be available to local families and businesses. And Tom Utek's utility company tells us the route it has chosen for the power line offers a lower cost to ratepayers and maximizes the use of existing corridors.
Why should people who don't live in this area, might not ever come to this part of Wisconsin, care about what's happening?
They should care because it's their backyard next.
Back in Laura Evans' backyard in Aurora, Illinois, local officials made the decision to put a 180-day pause on building new data centers.
We basically put a pause to make sure that if these data centers want to come in, that they can be good neighbors going forward and try to really address some of the concerns that our citizens have.
The city's pause on new data centers, which ends next month, was a way to buy time for local officials like Allison Lindbergh to put new regulations in place.
Is the conversation around how to regulate data centers happening fast enough as how much they're popping up right now?
I definitely think that the regulations need to be happening faster. The fact that we, as this smallish city, are the ones that are leading in this is frankly pretty surprising considering the magnitude of the impact of these data centers.
In a statement to ABC News, the data center just behind Laura's home apologized to neighbors and said it is committed to supporting policies that accelerate new power supply and grid technologies to improve reliability and moderate costs over time. And it installed temporary noise barriers while permanent engineered solutions were being designed and fabricated.
Some proponents of this technology say this is the future. What do you say to that?
Build it somewhere else and just make sure it's done right, because this isn't right.
All right, we are just about ready to hear from our presenter. Let me advance our slides so that we can introduce her. Today, our speaker is Abre Conner. Abre Conner Esquire is the director of the Center for Environmental and Climate Justice and oversees strategy and collaboration across the NAACP to dismantle environmental racism. She has taught education law and was faculty in the Environmental Policy and Management program at the University of California, Davis. She has worked at numerous civil rights entities, including the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, and Capitol Hill. She was also an associate in the White House Office of Presidential Personnel in the Obama administration. She currently sits on the American Bar Association's Board of Governors, Earthjustice Board of Trustees, and was appointed to the EPA's first HBCU MSI Advisory Council. And just this year, she was honored by Time magazine, where she was named one of the Time Closers of 2026. The headline for her feature article was Abre Conner is helping communities defend their environmental rights. Given the research of NAACP on data centers and communities and their playbook on frontline communities on the topic, Abre has a strong grasp on what communities are already experiencing. So we are really excited for this opportunity to hear from Abre today. I am going to stop sharing, and Abre, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for putting together this very thoughtful, training series. I feel that it is so important for us to be creating opportunities to have thoughtful dialogue, as you mentioned before, and for universities to really be the place where we can have that convergence of the different resources that exist across the country and internationally, so that we can move forward in a way that we're all really proud of, because as the video mentioned, it's happening very quickly, and the more that we are having these conversations, the better that we can move forward in a united front. So I am going to share a few slides regarding my topic today, which is how this kind of impacts the community. What are some of the things that we're seeing? Why is this important to have this conversation with communities being centered? Because really, the policy solutions should come from understanding what is actually happening at the community level as well. So this is a photo of a convening that we did last year when we first realized that we were in for a conversation and a moment where data centers were quite frankly going to be at the middle of what it meant for us to define environmental and climate justice issues for this generation, and to make sure that we were doing it in a way that centered civil rights issues. And so at that time, we pulled together the Frontline Framework, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But it was important for us to develop out data center principles that were developed at a historically Black college in Memphis, Lemoyne Owen, with the people who were really talking about data centers at that time. And I wanted to show this photo because it does reflect the individuals who, at the beginning, before there was a lot of national discussion around this, who were saying, no, we need to make sure that there is a community-centered, community-focused perspective of what this moment means. And so I'm going to show a quick video that highlights a little bit about our perspective and some of the folks that we work with when it comes to building this out.
If there's no planet, there are no voting rights to advocate for. Environmental and climate justice is as much a part of the civil rights movement as any issue.
What we're seeing as it relates to AI data centers is in Black and other frontline communities.
It is disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities, and this is just a new rendition of different entities, different industries coming into our communities and not listening to our needs.
Whether it's fossil fuels or it's this next big thing with AI, it's the same playbook. They go into communities, they extract, they lie, and they exploit.
We see the effects of water pollution, air pollution, increased utility bills. We see affordability being stretched in a lot of different ways.
There are some real mental health implications from having a constant hum coming into your house.
Using dirty fossil fuels that pollute the air that we breathe, that make people sick, that we know can cause cancer, and we're being told that's just a consequence.
The profits that are coming from these AI data centers are not actually going to the community itself. It's going to the tech billionaires.
And the way that our society is set up right now, profit is over people.
We're scrambling, trying to get people out, to send mailers out. Let's hit the mailboxes just to enlighten them on what is going to be right here in your neighborhood.
Historically, Black folk in particular have been amazing at is organizing. We organize resources, we organize people for transformationally positive purposes.
The tenacity and the bravery to take these data centers head on, coupled with the support of the NAACP, having thought leaders come together and create a strategy, blueprints, templates. This is extraordinary, and what a time to get involved.
NAACP held an amazing convening in our district in Memphis and said, look, what are the guiding principles that we need? Having community benefits agreements, putting conversations with community first, not last.
No one is too small to be able to do this. We've seen the most ordinary people step up to the plate and win big, because it starts with one person, and then it goes to your auntie, and then it goes to your grandma. That's organizing. And organizing is a time-tested endeavor, and it proves that we can actually overcome these injustices that we're facing.
Let's have a seat at the table, because we don't want to be on the menu all the time. So let's put us at the table.
The truth is, we do this work for love. We do it for the love of our community, the love of our people, the love of our future, and that is what sustains us.
One tangible next step is to actually go to our page at naacp.org and share out the information that we've made available as it relates to dirty data centers. It's important for people to know the truth. So I wanted to start with that video because I wanted to also start with voices of people who, similarly to the video that you saw earlier, are in the midst of doing the organizing work from an environment and climate justice perspective. Um, and there is still a lot of misinformation about, what we're seeing when it comes to AI data center infrastructure. The misinformation now, I will say, is because we are seeing companies shift their narrative. And I think that that is because of the community opposition and resistance that we're seeing across the country. And so, because of that, we feel like it's even more important to make sure that the conversations that we're having identify what is actually truthful when it comes to AI data centers. At the height of the fracking boom, I was litigating cases in the Central Valley of California. And I remember at that time that there was this narrative that fracking was going to allow for us to move into a place where we have energy dominance, that we were going to be able to fix all the issues regarding energy in this country if we just built out fracking infrastructure in a few places across the country. And of course that expanded. And the places where they also decided to build out that fracking infrastructure were in places where you had rural, unincorporated, or other types of communities where, in my opinion, I believed that they felt they might not receive as much resistance for one reason or another, or that there was already industrial build out. And so it's like, oh, well, this seems like the type of place where we could be able to like test out this new solution at the time. And the practices of like what was being offered to communities at that time was very little. And there was not a lot of conversation around, decommissioning any of that infrastructure, or the fact that they were asking for contracts for literally decades, and then like throwing a community fair in, as a cost benefit type of conversation of we'll throw a community fair at the local school. And that will be a way for us to show that we're partners with communities for adding fracking into their communities. And at that time, there were a lot of community members who were saying, we don't think that this is right. And I feel that at that time, the larger grouping of folks who could come together, that there wasn't organizing that was happening quickly enough. And so as the narrative continued to shift, then the response to the individuals on the ground was, well, we don't have enough reports. We need more information. We need more studies. We need more of this. We need more of that. And then, of course, shortly after that, we got the reports. And the reports just backed up what people were saying, which is that fracking is, it creates a public health concern for the members of the community, and not just for that generation, but for future generations. And that it really shouldn't have happened in the way that it was being spread across the country. And that there should have been more questions that were asked at the beginning. But because of the fact that the narrative, without any deeper questions being asked, was taken at, face value, then we ended up with these infrastructures across the country that I think many of us can now say that was not the right decision for us to make. And I think that we are at a place where the AI data center conversation, that we are at a critical, point where we can either repeat the harms of the past and the ways that we have operated in the past, or we can listen to communities now and make sure that in 15 to 20 years, we're not saying, gosh, yeah, if we had only made different decisions earlier on. And the data center harms are numerous, right? There, regardless of what the narrative is that continues to change, and I am monitoring the chat to some extent, but I won't be able to answer all of them. But I agree, yes, this pattern has shown up with a number of different companies, from cigarette companies, the fossil fuel companies, and that is the question: why should we trust? The conversations that are happening now without us having all the information. The water infrastructure and clean water concerns are real, regardless of if a company is saying that they are going to create a closed loop system. That has become now a term of art in a way that companies then don't feel like they have to answer any other questions about what it even means to have a closed loop system. And for those who aren't familiar, this has become this narrative of like, we're not going to use any water because we're going to have a closed loop and it'll magically just continue to use the same water over and over again. And we'll never need it anymore. And that's just not true. So there's no such thing as a completely closed loop system as it exists right now. There will have to be more water because we all have taken, basic science classes, and it's not going to just stay there. And the reasons why they need the water is to cool and to operate the actual data center. So the water has to be replenished. There are certain data center infrastructures where they have offered to potentially have like a water recycling plant, but that water still has to come from an actual infrastructure that exists. Now, think about the types of places where they are proposing to build many of these hyperscale data centers. In many of the places, they don't necessarily have a brand new water infrastructure and a water plant to serve the current residents there. And for those who are not necessarily in the water space per se, it's not, in the millions of dollars typically when it comes to replacing, a water infrastructure in a community. It can be in the billions of dollars to actually replace it with a state-of-the-art new system. So those are the kinds of conversations that are oftentimes not being had. When you put strain on water infrastructure, it ages it more quickly. So if there's already aging water infrastructure, then what's going to happen when you put a data center in a community and it's going to take hundreds of millions of gallons of water, which is much more than just, you and I would use, or even just a business, for example, would use if they, and that's another conversation when we get to the jobs. So all of these things are pieces of the conversation when it comes to where are we, what's the narrative now and what do we know? And then what is the future going to look like? It's not just the water use itself, it's also the contamination of the water sources nearby. There have now been multiple reports of people's water being contaminated because of a data center in their community. And there is not a lot of conversation from the companies around what they are doing to make sure that that does not be the case. And we can surmise as to why that's not being answered. And I would say that because of some of the reasons that were in the ABC video, we're moving very fast. And sometimes when people don't have answers, they just don't respond. And if they don't have a solution. The air quality impacts we also know are vast. It's not just impacting the immediate community, it's impacting communities far and wide. There was a report, and I think that you all are I think there's gonna be a training as a part of this series with one of the researchers who did some testing in the South Haven area regarding XAI's potential reach if they were to operate Colossus 2. And it demonstrated that the airshed would impact not just folks in DeSoto County, but also folks in Memphis, also as far as potentially as close to Jackson, Mississippi, which may not that is over a 200-mile radius. And so that's huge for the people who are impacted. And so the conversations that are happening at the community level, this is very much a unifying moment, because even if a data center is not necessarily in your community, a data center in the county over might still impact your airshed as well. And then energy in the grid. It is a it is there's not necessarily a solution for that as well. We've seen from some utilities where they're saying we need large loads in order to meet the capacity needs for the grid. Now, whether or not those large loads need to be data centers is a completely different question. Then you also have what is happening in South Haven, which I'll talk a little bit about, which is that you have a hyperscale data center where they're using methane gas turbines. And so they're like, we're not using the grid. Instead, we're just putting turbines in the community. So there are a lot of concerns regardless of how they're being built, and that need to be considered. The quality of life is a huge concern. We're seeing more and more lawsuits and advocacy around how noisy these data centers are. One of our members shared with me that they used to get 9 hours of sleep. And they actually moved to their community because it was so peaceful. And then when the data center came into their community, they now only get 3 to 4 hours of sleep per night. And that's a huge difference. And especially given the fact that they actually moved to that community for a peaceful life. And so it is literally changing how people are able to interact with their everyday life. So because we recognize that this was a conversation that was multifaceted, we developed out the first ever set of national guiding principles for data center build out. And we built it on the 17 EJ principles that were developed in 1991. We actually talked to the folks who crafted those to make sure that we were doing it respectfully. And we had a 2-day convening where folks came together virtually as well as in person at Lemoyne-Owen. And this is what over 100 different organizations, activists, coalitions, and then our members believed was important for us to recognize so that we could have a North Star when it comes to data center conversations, that our health and the environment are sacred, communities most affected must lead, jobs cannot justify the harm, accountability must be enforceable, that we reject false solutions and fossil fuel dependency, infrastructure must be community-led, interconnected harms require interconnected solutions, solidarity builds power, and that we walk our talk. We also developed out a number of one-pagers because there is a lot of misinformation that's happening, and all of that information is available. It's literally from the community perspective, one of the number one things that is requested is just public education material so that people can use that information as they're having conversations at a local level. So I'll talk very quickly just about our work in South Haven and in Memphis. When we first got involved with the XAI case, we worked from understanding what our branch and our state conference members were seeing. And this is President Kermit Moore. He's the president of the Memphis branch. And he was a part of the early conversations to say, we don't want this big facility in our community at a time where folks just got finished fighting a Byhalia pipeline. There were local organizers and groups who were a part of this conversation. I think you all heard from Latricia Adams at Young, Gifted, and Green, MCAP, Protect Our Aquifer, and other groups who had been saying, this seems strange that there's going to be a hyperscale data center that's being built and we don't have any transparency into the decision making. And so we, at that time, we're like, well, maybe, the health department and maybe, the council members, maybe they don't fully understand what's happening because this seems so ridiculous that no one is responding with the sense of urgency of the fact that there are methane gas turbines that are being put in place in a community and there hasn't been any public process. And what we realized at that time was that there was at least some understanding, but that it seemed as though for some of the local agencies that this was one of the largest kind of decisions that they would ever have to make, and that there wasn't the adequate level of conversation from the technical assistance to government side to help them to truly understand what the decision was that they were making. And so we sent the letter, and because it did not necessarily seem to move them in the way that it should have, we filed a 60-day notice of intent to sue. So what this is under environmental laws, there is this ability for you to file a lawsuit if the government entities are not moving or doing anything about the pollution that's happening in the community. And so we filed that. And then we also filed the permit that was issued after the XAI facility was already operating. And so our argument was that you should not be able to just operate methane gas turbines without getting a permit first. Like you have to start with a permit. And then if that's approved, then, maybe you can move forward. But that's not what happened. They decided to just start operating and then, do that and then ask for forgiveness later. And so we filed a notice of intent to sue. We thought that by filing that at that time, that would allow for them to understand, the severity of what happened. But what ended up happening is that they basically copied and pasted that same kind of that same type of framing in South Haven, Mississippi. So we had over 200 people who showed up to a hearing that the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality put together. And everyone showed up and said, no, we don't want the data center. We don't want the permit. We don't want any of it. And MDEQ decided to continue to move forward with the permit regardless. So we filed a lawsuit and we are also appealing the permit in South Haven. Now, why I wanted to focus in a little bit on this is because this case has become really interesting as it relates to how important community is to these conversations. We filed our lawsuit and then we filed something called a motion for preliminary injunction, which basically means that it allows the court to move more quickly in responding to our case. After we filed that, we just yesterday found out, we knew a couple of weeks before that the U.S. Department of Justice was looking into potentially being involved. And we found out just yesterday late Monday night, that the U.S. Department of Justice, for I believe what is the first time that they've ever done this, are jumping in to support a now trillionaire, to allow for this facility to operate, and saying that it's a matter of national security for them to be able to allow XAI to continue to pollute in communities. And I read a statement that basically said that, we were weaponizing environmental laws when they need this facility for national security. Now, for those who don't know, the U.S. Department of Justice's role is supposed to be to protect defend civil rights, to protect people, and to ensure that the public welfare is, defended. And this is not what I believe is happening at this moment. But I think that we still have an opportunity. First of all, we're not backing down at all. We have a hearing in about a month or so, and I look forward to seeing them at that hearing. But secondly, it also demonstrates why it's going to be so important for communities to continue to stand up, because we are literally in the fight of our lives of just a few people who feel that they should be able to control all the decisions and that community should not have a voice in that. But I think that we have the opportunity to continue to show up at these hearings, to continue to show up when there are opportunities to voice how we perceive what is happening. And that is going to matter. And obviously, this administration is they are noticing that as well. It's also a midterm election year. And so that's something that we need to remind ourselves when it comes time to making sure that we have people who represent our interests in November. Because we're almost at time, I just want to go to our recommendations for this year. This was based on tracking now almost 300 different submissions to our tracker online and the convenings that we did last year, as where we see are the places for community intervention and advocacy. Permitting reform and environmental protections. Transparency continues to be a major concern, and fiscal accountability from these data centers. Tracking projects and data center mapping. People power and mobilization now more than ever. And leadership development and representation. And we're starting to see that with, individuals who are running for office, who are literally running on a data center platform. And so I think that we have the opportunity to change things, to make sure that communities continue to stay centered. But it is going to take all of us to make sure that we do that. And I will stop there.
Well, please join me in thanking our presenter. You're welcome to do that through emojis or through the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you have shared with us thus far, your expertise, the work that has gone into what has been shared. There are lots of comments that are here in the chat. Some are in the form of questions and some are in the form of commentary. And we want to try to get to as many people as possible. And thank you to those that you've already responded to. I have dropped a link in the chat, and I will do it again a little bit later. We want to hear from you, feedback on this webinar as we continue to form this series. So please go ahead. Don't forget to take the opportunity to share feedback on this so we can continue to make this what it needs to be. I'm stalling so you can have some time to add some more questions into the chat so that we can share these with our wonderful speaker today. So Abre, you shared a bit about community benefits agreements. What do we need to, what should people know about these? Are there opportunities therein?
Yeah, so we actually have a template that we developed that lives on our Stop Dirty Data page. And I think that one of the things to note is that when it comes to community benefit agreements, if you're doing it at the hyperlocal level without the backing of like a local government entity, it can be a challenge. And those are some of the things that we flagged in our template. Some of the ways that you can try to ensure that it literally exists at the community level, potentially at the state level, is to find hooks either with your local municipality to get them to put some guardrails in place to say that if a data center is going to come into our municipality, these are the requirements that need to be met. So then there's a baseline that exists without you having to kind of play whack-a-mole with every single development. I understand that sometimes that's not possible, but that is a good place to start. We also got involved with in Wisconsin, where local activists in our state environment and climate justice committee there was working to have the public service commission in that area to actually put in place some restrictions, and so that data centers weren't getting discounts, but also if they were going to operate in the state of Wisconsin, that there are certain requirements that needed to be met. And so there, you know, it is really hard to do it at the community level. It's not impossible. We also have like information about getting in place a community advisory board before you start the negotiation, because we recommend that there is a community advisory type of group that can shepherd the process along and to make sure that there is accountability if there's any kind of fund or anything like that that's put in place. But I also think that one thing to note when it comes to community benefits is it is a starting point for like, what are they willing to actually offer something that comprehensive? And if they're not, then maybe that's also the answer to what makes sense for your community as well.
Very helpful, thank you. And the comments are continuing to come in. I'll share another one. Can you speak to social license to operate? Basically, data centers locating where whole communities welcome their presence versus locating where elected leaders want them for revenue, but the unwelcome impacts fall upon everyday citizens. And that comment comes from David. Thank you for this question, David.
Yeah, I think that this speaks to the point around it's a midterm election year. So I think that it's important to remind elected officials that they are indeed elected. And to the point that certain elected officials feel very comfortable speaking for community members and they don't, that is, I think, a very powerful way to remind them that they have to speak for the people who they represent. Um, and they're also, depending on where you live, you know, there are potential legal actions that can be taken if the local body is so far off from what the community needs, or any other considerations that are not, you know, being reviewed in their decision making. So that is definitely state by state, municipality by municipality. But for example, if you're in the midst of like, you know, a water crisis, or if you're in the midst of, you know, a pause for all other type of industrial development, and then there's a conversation happening around welcoming a data center, there might be some other things that you can pursue when it comes to the considering how much influence the community can have regardless of what elected officials say.
Thank you. I'm going to try to squeeze in maybe two more questions. I know we're close on time. We've got lots of questions and comments, and maybe I can merge a string of comments, a string of discussion that's happening in our chat into one. And that would be around renewable energy and agroforestry. Do you see opportunities here around agroforestry, around wind, solar, as it relates to data centers and communities?
Well, I will say this, a lot of the data center build out that's happening has been done through companies who seem to have a connection to moving forward this administration's framework for AI data centers. And taking that into consideration with some of the other decisions that this administration has made, for example, to cancel, wind contracts, like billion-dollar wind contracts, and this administration saying, drill, baby, drill, and that fossil fuels are the way to go, that impacts what this conversation looks like, especially when you have governors, for example, who are welcoming these infrastructures, not all of them, but some of them, with the understanding of what this administration's goals are. Now, I know that there's also conversations, especially when we built out our frontline framework, there were folks who were coming to this conversation from a number of different spaces, and one of the spaces that individuals were coming to this conversation from was people who were very interested in protecting wildlife and animals. And I think that there's nuance into what solutions make sense within communities. And that's why I think that there has to be like the community impacted must lead. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, is, a few ultra wealthy people who are making the decisions for the community. So that's a long way of saying maybe in the future we're not seeing the opportunities exist to have like comprehensive conversations because of where many of these conversations are starting.
Yeah. So the context is everything. The who is a part of the conversation is everything. And we for some of the opportunities that lie, we have to view those opportunities within the current context. I think you said as gently as possible. I know we are over on time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I got one more I want to squeeze in for you, because there were several comments around lessons learned from the past, our past experiences with cigarettes, our past experiences with fossil fuels. Are there lessons learned from some of those experiences or other large things, large entities that affected our nation? Are there some lessons learned from that that can be applied now?
I think that the biggest lesson is that, well, yeah, I love the one that's in the chat, organize. Yeah, continuing to organize. I think that that's really important. I think that that was, where we started, right? Like where we started our Stop Dirty Data campaign was with communities who were like organizing on the ground. A lot of times, the groups were like, we thought we were the only ones who were fighting this data center. Now, of course, we know that that's not the case. But that's really important. And to listen to the communities themselves. I'm starting to see a lot more thought pieces from people who don't have connections to communities and trying to discredit community members as, not knowing what it is that they're talking about. And I just think that that is the wrong message that we should be sending now, because we have seen that happen in the past. And then it took, maybe a couple decades, but then, wow, the community was actually right. And so I think we have to resist that opportunity to make it seem as though the people who are impacted do not know their own lived experience, and their experience is expertise, and it should be seen at the same level of expertise as anyone who, has been doing research, and because their research is like what they have seen the patterns of, and the patterns of companies who have come in and out promising something and not actually delivering.
So there is a comment that's in the chat here from you from Miss Arnita Gatson, and Miss Arnita Gatson is the chair of the NAACP Louisville branch's environmental committee. And I think she has an announcement to share with the group related to things related to an opportunity here in Louisville. I'll yield the floor to Miss Arnita.
Well, what I just wanted to say very quickly, I see it's been rolling in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. Is that there's an opportunity for review and for remarks. There's what is it? The opportunity to talk about the I'm not getting it together today. All the comments that have been made. These are actually community comments. And we have a 30-day opening for people to make comments on the comments, to either agree with them, talk about them, whatever, however you can. I invite anyone that wants to. I'm not going to say whether they should be, where they should be from. I'm inviting anyone that would like to make comments. It is rolling in the chat, and you can just hook on to the site that they're giving it. There it is. Aviana has put it back up there, and you can talk about the comments there. And also, I just want to say to Abre, they are rolling across right now the lawsuit, NAACP lawsuit on the AI. It's rolling across the channel. So there you go. Thank you so much, Abre. Wonderful, great opportunity, and your information is great.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Arnita. Thank you sincerely, Aubrey. Yeah, please go ahead.
I know that we're in, but I just wanted to also say that Chair Gatson was actually a part of those individuals who were, when we developed out, the principles and our community benefit, like that work, that she joined. So Kentucky was represented in those conversations. So just appreciative of her leadership.
I love these connections. And Aubrey, how can we stay in the loop? It looks like you have something coming up this evening, maybe. I don't know if that's public, if people want to continue to learn from you. I know NAACP also has a survey that's out. Are there ways that we can remain connected?
Yeah, no. Well, today we're doing an IG live, and so you can we're doing an IG live with Evan Yells at Clouds. And so it'll be on my page. So if you go to my page, like Abre_Conner, and then or at his page, you'll be able to see the live, and we'll be discussing a lot of these conversations because we're just a couple days out from Juneteenth, with the lens of what this means for localized democracy and Black liberation at this moment. We also have the tracker on our page, and we're encouraging everyone to please continue to fill out the tracker. Thanks for everyone who has thus far. It helps us to realize, like, what are the things, where are the areas where we can narrow in and develop out policy solutions that come from the ground up. And then we continue to add information on our Stop Dirty Data page, and then our NAACP social pages as well are great places. And also, please connect with, Miss Gatson, because the Environment and Climate Justice Committee in the state is, the point of contact for the issues that are happening there. And we communicate in order to make sure that that's built out nationally.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And there's a beautiful comment from Anjali in the chat, wishing you all a healthy and happy Juneteenth. I second that. Thank you so much, Aubrey. I'm just going to share a little bit to close us out. We want to make sure we hear from everyone. So please, we would love for you to take some time Share your feedback in the survey. You can either scan the QR code that's on the screen, or you're able to visit the link as it is written on the screen. It's also in your chat, just in case you hadn't noticed. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much, Abre Conner, for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you to all who are in the audience for your participation. The conversation that was in the chat was just so interesting, where people were filling in their expertise and asking their questions. Thank you to the Christina Lee Brown Environmental Institute for hosting this, along with Greenheart Louisville and the U of L Superfund Research Center. Thank you also for support from Physicians for Social Responsibility. Stay tuned for upcoming topics in the series. Next week on June 24th at noon Eastern, join us as we learn about data centers and economics, or so I should say the economics of data centers. And we'll hear from Dr. Michael Cork from Harvard University, which Abre teed up some of his research, I do believe. All of our webinars take place on Wednesdays at noon Eastern, and you can join any, you can join all, but please do share with your networks. And just so you know, we are considering adding a bonus session, so stay tuned in response to some of the feedback that you've offered. So please stay connected by visiting us online at centers.louisville.edu/environ. Stay up to date on our upcoming events by visiting the events webpage from there. And you can follow us on all of the socials at U of L Environ. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.